It's the Craggy Rugby Podcast. It's the midweek edition prior to the Connacht trip to Benetton for round 4 of the Rainbow Cup. And this week I've got Craggy Statsman Danny Deegan.
How's it going?
And Linley MacKenzie from the Galway Advertiser.
Good evening, all.
Okay, before we get to chat to Linley and Danny, let's hear some of the highlights from the press conference today, where Denis Buckley and Pete Wilkins were talking to William Davies.
Big day coming up for you. 200 caps on the horizon. That's some achievement.
It's obviously a big milestone and one I'm proud of. I suppose with the week that's in it and the importance of the game, it's nice to recognise it, but at the same time, the focus is on the game. In a way, it's no more important than 199 or 201. But yeah, look, it's great to get there, and something I'm proud of. But my focus this week now is on the game and my performance this weekend and the team's performance.
Yeah, I expected you to say that. And that's the strength of a team man. But still, if you go back to the 3rd of September 2011, which is a fair while ago, I think Ronan Loughney walked off and you walked on to play in Benetton for your first cap on a boiling hot evening. I think it was well over 30 degrees there. What were you expecting out of a career of professional rugby at that stage? Had you any sort of idea where you were going, or was this just I've arrived at the starting point?
It's funny. Like I do remember that game quite well. So like you said, it was very hot, and they actually broke it down into 4 quarters. So there's a water break on 60 minutes, and that's when I came on. Because of how hot it was. I don't know. I suppose at that stage, my goals were to go as far as I can. Up until then, the big goal had been to get my first cap, and then after that, it was get my next cap, and then try and get a start, which I think I did later that year, against Edinburgh at home in the sports ground. In a way, it's a long time ago, but in another way, it doesn't seem that long ago either. So it's pretty cool.
There's another little challenge for you. Benetton are involved in this. Seven tries in roughly 100 games, the last of which was against Benetton in 2016. So it's time for a try. You haven't scored a try other than under Pat Lam. So a try on Saturday evening in Benetton to cap off the 200.
Let's see what happens. It's certainly not going to be one of my goals for the game, but if it's a consequence of us getting a good win that I can get a try, well then so be it. But like I said, my focus will be on trying to perform well, like individually, and then obviously adding to the team's performance and getting a result. Because like Teresa are 3 from 3, they're top of the league. It's the last time we went over there was warm, but not as warm as it's going to be this weekend. And they play a pretty good brand of rugby. They move the ball from side to side. They play quite deep, but it's actually quite hard to defend against that because it can be quite energy sapping to try and go after, like with our line speed, to try and go after their attack if they get around us. So it's going to be a tough game. The last game was very tough. We won it in the last play of the game. They're 3 from 3, top of the table. It's like, we understand how difficult it's going to be, but I think we have a pretty good plan in place to combat them this weekend.
It's a must-win game coming up against, and it's not normally Benetton that you associate with that type of statement, but they've kind of torn this competition open a little bit with 3 wins.
Yeah, they've done really well, in fairness, and I think considering the season they'd had with they'd be obviously disappointed with where they finished in the conference and results-wise, but no, they've got their act together and played some really exciting rugby as well. I think there's probably a misconception of their season before that in the Pro 14. They actually played some really good rugby, but it was the sort of final stage of turnovers and penalties that probably cost them greater success in the competition. So the capacity there to play has always been there, I think, and they've managed to either execute the final pass or get that little bit of success that they probably were missing earlier in the year. So they're a threat, and we'll have to be on our mettle in order to deliver.
Connacht got a steel win down there sometime this season. It's hard to keep track because of all the way the season's been so broken up, but it really was a last minute. They were distraught at the end of it. What do they actually bring? Because what's their brand of rugby? What are you looking out for from them?
Well, I think first and foremost is that they do play. They do have a crack, and as the game gets unstructured, and if you give them too much possession in sort of chaotic scenarios, then they're actually really good at causing you problems. If you look back at last season as a whole, or the Pro 14 season just gone, they were still the fourth best team in the competition for generating run meters, and I think they were the second best team for kick meters. So overall, they were the best team at earning meters down the field. So there was an enormous threat there, an enormous, I suppose, quality and potential. But it was the conceding of those turnovers that often undid them. And the game we played over there, we went in there with that knowledge and knowing that it was really important not to give them any loose possession, I suppose. And they were still able to hurt us with those run meters and kick long. And even when we thought we were exiting fairly efficiently, they kicked it back even longer. So we spent large parts of that game finding it really challenging to get out of our own half. It's something we'll have to think carefully about in terms of how we approach the game this week. So that potential to play, that ability to play has always been there. It's been the turnovers that have cost them. So from a defensive point of view, to make sure we apply enough pressure to keep those turnovers coming will be really important. But equally, to respect the fact that they are a threat with ball in hand, and we'll need to do a good job against them.
Okay, Danny, as our resident stats man, Denis is on 200 caps. Throws 3 stats that people might not know about it.
Okay, well, he actually made his debut away to Benetton all the way back in September of 2011. Connacht won that day 11-9. He then made his 100th cap against Cardiff Blues in November 2016, and Connacht also won.
And just something else to add into that. On his debut, he came on for Ronan Loughney, and on his 100 cap, Ronan Loughney replaced him.
And another stat I have for you, as a coincidence, his last try for Connacht was actually also against Benetton in the 2016-17 season.
That was 98 games ago.
Well, lots of stuff there for Denis. But anyway, Linley, you've watched him all through the years, probably more than any of us. He's a heck of a rugby player.
He's a heck of a rugby player, and he's a heck of a nice person, I have to say. What more can you say for someone who sort of came from Roscommon, played his rugby with Craigs, and has been a Connacht man through and through, and all his career. Denis is a player who has probably just given everything in terms of his playing career to Connacht, and I think that deserves recognition, for just that. He was asked questions like, why didn't he leave? He was today. He said he had 2 serious offers that he had considered, but at the end of the day, he was a Connacht man, and he loves Connacht, and he wants to continue playing for Connacht. And I think that sort of attitude is rare. I think in professionals today. I mean, I know times are slightly different from when he made those decisions, but he's a really huge part of who Connacht, of what Connacht is, and he's just on the field as well. He adds something, around the pitch. He adds something to the scrum. He's dynamic. He's technically good. The coaches to say that it works extremely hard. And what more can you ask from someone, who plays for Connacht and who would play for any rugby club? And apart from that, he's a thoroughly nice person.
The only thing we could ask for him is as a man who's still only 30, which means he should have some years hopefully left playing for Connacht, and with a bit of luck, Ireland, because he has to be the most unlucky player not to have been capped so far for Ireland, and with a bit of luck we'll see that change in the not too distant future. Okay, so moving on, talking about players' futures. There's news from the other side of the Irish Sea that Sean Gareth O'Brien is possibly on his way to Exeter, which would be a huge blow for Connacht, because he really has blossomed as this season sort of drifts on, but certainly he's taken the bull by the horns in the last few weeks and has turned into a really important player for Connacht, Linley.
Yeah, I think Sean O'Brien is probably one of the players who is really benefiting from the kind of merger that has undergone with Andy Friend with the the academy and the senior players. Once upon a time, they were quite separate. They did their work separately. They lived completely separate. Now they're actually training and almost living with those senior players. And I think they're only benefiting from it because their standards are rising all the time. And at the same time, they're pushing some of the older fellas as well. So I think Sean O'Brien is definitely one who has benefited from that. I really did not know much about him, to be honest, until the last season or so when he started playing for the A games, and then certainly this season when he came in, he has really, really blossomed. He has the look of a Robbie Henshaw about him. He's big and he's strong and he's physical, and he is just slotted so easily into that centre role that it's hard to believe that he is actually was only an academy player. So I think I think it's a huge loss because it's rare that Connacht develop sometimes. It's not always that Connacht can develop a homegrown player, and to lose one now who we have developed, we can't blame him. Let's face it, if you got an opportunity to go to Exeter, they're the champions of England, you'd be very tempted too. But it is a big blow, I think, for Connacht.
Let's hope that it is only a rumour, but I wouldn't bank on it. Okay, just before we start talking about the match, the upcoming game against Benetton, we had a bit of good news in the injury front today, but before I give you the rest of the injury updates, the number one for me was that Jarrad Butler is back, and there was talk about the possibility of maybe Jarrad getting selected for the Ireland team for the games against Japan and the USA that are coming up, which would be a huge boost to Connacht, as it would stop him being an NIQ player. What do you think, Linley? Is this a possibility, or are we just daydreaming here?
Well, I don't think it's a daydream. I think it will be difficult enough. Jarrad has had a share of his injuries, but I think Jarrad is a player who would always offer a lot to any team for whom he plays. He came over here as an NIQ player. He was very quick in assuming the captaincy. He's a very well-spoken, well-educated player, and I think he would offer a lot to any team. And in addition to that, obviously, he's very versatile, as in he can play across the back row and has done on many occasions. And he's shown his leadership qualities. They're not maybe the all singing, all dancing type of leaders that others may be, and he is very kind of quite quiet, but he's I think he likes to set examples and he tries to play by example. And I think maybe that's been one of the frustrating things that he's actually had to go through with some of the injuries that he's had. I think it would be a huge boost for him, for Connacht. It would prove success of the NIQ system as well. So that's an added bonus. And it would also, allow Connacht, to have another one.
Danny, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think Linley's nailed it on the head. I think looking at Butler, he's a great leader, and any coach would love to have a player with his versatility being able to play any position in the back row.
Fair enough. Yeah, keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and best of luck to Jarrad. So the rest of that injury update, which is one of the more positive ones this season. Jarrad is back, Matt Healy is back, Paul Boyle is back, another possible for an Irish squad, you'd hope. Oisin Dowling, and somebody who's been on a long-term injury list is Colm the Butler. He looks as though he's back ready for selection as well. So it's nice to see so many players back. We still have a few guys on injury reserve that we won't see again this season, but one that is, if there was another game, if there was a third game we might have seen, would be Tom Farrell. But he's back in training, but he won't quite make it ready for one of the next two games. But great to see that he's back on board and ready to go. So, Benetton. Danny, Benetton are top of the Rainbow Cup table. Can we beat them?
I think we can. I think this Rainbow Cup has been superb for them. They had a very tough year in the Pro 14. They drew one game and lost 15. But in that, they picked up 6 losing bonus points. So they were never too far away when they did lose. But in saying that, and and we knew that when we just stole the win from them the last play of the game, the last time we played. But we seem to have a bit of a hex over them. We've won our last 7 games against Benetton, scoring bonus point tries in 5 of those games, and three tries in the other 2. So we seem to be able to. We've got their number a little bit, and I think they would have learned a lot from the last game, where Benetton aren't exactly. They're not a pushover, and if you give them a chance, they can take it. It'll be just interesting to see if they can pull back their skills. Like they were quite sloppy. They gave up a lot of ball. They conceded 21 turnovers in that game. So it'll be interesting to see if they can change that around as well.
Yeah, Linley, and you're looking at Kieran Crowley on his way out there, but he's produced some very good teams in Benetton. They're a really good team to watch, and with the weather forecast looking as though it's going to be 22 or 23 degrees even by 5 o'clock in the evening on Saturday, it could be a cracking match.
Yeah, I think Benetton are now reaping possibly the benefits of Kieran Crowley's coaching for the last few years. Look, they've got a number of internationals that they'll have back. They're a team growing in confidence, and while their Pro 14 season wasn't the best, let's face it, they nearly beat Connacht, and had it not been for some Bundyaki brilliance, they probably would have. And in fact, I think we were all on the edge of our seats that night, watching it. And although I know Pete Wilkins referred to today that they never thought they'd lose that game, I'm sure most of Connacht watching it would have thought that it was quite possible. So they have really developed. They're a tricky side, They don't play kind of necessarily conventional, rugby. And they have a lot of talent there and a lot of threats. And I think Connacht, the only good thing about that last near miss in Benetton was the fact that Connacht has studied them just so much more, possibly more than what they have before, because it was a real sort of kick up the backside type of game for them. And so I know that they will have learned how to deal with some of the issues that they're going to face with Benetton. I'm delighted that where Benetton sit. I'm delighted that, I think that, it's quite easy for people to say, oh, it's the Rainbow Cup and people have taken their foot off the pedals, etc., etc. Well, so what? Benetton have shown that they do care, and they're professionals, and everyone should care about whatever the tournament is and be professional. And so I'm delighted that they're sitting where they're sitting. Now, the trouble is there's a whole lot of people, I think, teams sitting quite close behind. And so and Connacht are one of those. So I think, Benetton will go out to maintain that 100% record. Connacht, if they are to have any hopes of getting to the final, they just have to win it. And I think we will see. I think this is a real key game for Connacht to back up the Munster win this time around, going away from home. It's usually been opposite in many ways. We go away from home, we come home, and then we lose, etc., etc. So, here's another opportunity. Back it up. There'll be a few changes in personnel, I'm sure, because as you mentioned, there's some of those players coming back, from injury, and obviously a big one is Bundyaki, who will be back, who we expect will be back, and he will definitely he'll be chomping at the bit, as Bundy always is. And let's face, he was the hero the last time out. He may not be the hero this time, but his presence on the field, his enthusiasm, his leadership role, everyone, we need a Bundy out there, actually, I think, with that team. So I would expect Connacht to win this match. I'd be very disappointed if they didn't.
Right, yeah, even though Connacht have only lost the one game, there's 6 teams who have only lost one game, with Benetton having lost none out of the 3, but Connacht are still 7th on points difference. So yeah, they could do it a win to have any chance, but they're still quite a distance away from getting to the final. But you just never know. What do you reckon, Danny? Are Connacht going to come away with a bonus point win? Because the chances are there's 2 teams probably going to get bonus point tries in this game.
Yeah. Well, you look at both teams and how they like to play. They both like to throw the ball around, and they both know how to score tries. So you could easily see bonus point tries for both teams. Now, I'd hope if Connacht can keep up the defensive effort that they had against Munster, maybe we'll be able to stop them. But no, I do think Connacht will win. I'm going to hold off on the bonus point though. I think it'll be a lot tighter than that, because I do think Benetton might have turned a corner, and winning is a habit.
It most certainly is. So let's hope Connacht continue their winning habit, having won their last game, and they continue their winning away habit, because they've won more this season than they've ever won in a season away from home, and that we have something positive to talk about on Saturday evening.
And I'm going to finish this podcast on a lovely little story that was told today at press conference. Go. And it was Michael Corcoran from RTE who mentioned it in the press conference today, when apparently the then manager of Connacht Rugby at the time, back in 2001, and we all know that was John Fallon, received a letter from a lad who was desperate to be a mascot. And that boy just happened to be none other than Denis Buckley. So I think it just goes to show that there's, he's a Connacht lad through and through. He had his opportunity to be a ball boy at 2001. What a wonder. All he said he wanted to do was hold Eric Elwood's hand onto the pitch. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating that if you look back on his history with Eric Elwood, with a lot of those players, possibly all his dreams have been fulfilled, but they've only been fulfilled by a lot of hard work on his part and a lot of diligence. And I think he deserves all the accolades this weekend.
He most certainly does. And of course, it was Eric who gave him his first cap too. So nice little way to round off the whole Denis Buckley story. So yeah, let's leave it there. Great stuff. Thanks, Linley. Thanks, Dan. Here's William.
8 teams are in action in the Northern Hemisphere version of the Rainbow Cup this weekend, and some teams are rested. Fixtures commence on Friday the 28th of May with Munster versus the Cardiff Blues. That game 7:35pm kickoff. And 3 games on Saturday, May the 29th. Ulster versus the Scarlets at 3pm. Benetton versus Connacht at 5:15pm Irish time. And Dragons versus Glasgow at 7:35pm.
Loose, cut it loose. Break out or nothing changes. Sad and confused. Don't wait until